The mail-order bride thought no one wanted her, until a little girl whispered, "Can you be my mommy forever?" Montana Territory, late autumn, 1883. The train whistle had long since faded into the cold distance, yet Clara Ray remained standing on the weather-worn platform. Her gloved fingers clutched a scuffed carpet bag, the leather edges frayed from years of travel. Each breath hung white in the sharp air, and dust swirled around her boots as the last passengers vanished into town. She had expected someone to be here. A man holding her name on a scrap of paper. A wagon waiting at the edge of the platform. Anything. But the wide yard lay empty save for a few loose crates and a tired-looking dog nosing for scraps. Clara tightened her shawl, her heart beating hard against her ribs. What if he changed his mind? What if I came all this way for nothing? The advertisement in the Philadelphia paper had been brief, almost desperate. Widowed rancher seeks God-fearing woman willing to travel west. Marriage in name and duty. Respect promised. Hard work required. She had written back at once, because what else had she? A seamstress's wages barely kept her fed. The boarding-house mistress had already warned her not to fall behind on rent again. Now here she stood, alone under a sky streaked gray with evening, staring down a future that seemed to be dissolving into smoke. A small voice broke through the chill wind. "Are you Miss Clara?" Clara looked down. A girl no more than 6 stood beside her, dark hair escaping from a knitted cap, cheeks red with cold. She hugged a wooden doll tight to her chest. "Yes, I'm Clara," she answered softly, kneeling to meet the child's eyes. "Who might you be?" "I'm Lily." The girl's lower lip trembled, though her gaze held steady. "Papa sent me. He couldn't come himself. The cows got out again." She said it with the weary authority of someone who had explained grown-up problems too many times before. Relief rushed through Clara so suddenly it made her dizzy. Someone had come for her after all, even if it wasn't the man she'd pinned her hopes on. "Thank you for meeting me, Lily," Clara said, brushing the girl's hair back from her forehead. "Shall we go find your papa?" Lily nodded solemnly. "You're gonna marry him, right?" The blunt question startled Clara, but she smiled, steadying her voice. "Yes, if he still wants me." The little girl's fingers slipped into hers with surprising trust. "Then can you be my mommy forever?" Clara's throat tightened. She'd crossed 2,000 miles seeking a place to belong. She hadn't expected her first welcome to come from a child. "Yes, sweetheart," she whispered, blinking back tears as they started down the dusty road together. "I'll do my best." The wind rose, carrying the scent of pine and distant wood smoke. Somewhere out on the wide Montana range, the man who had sent for her was waiting. Whether he'd greet her with gratitude or regret, that she would learn soon enough. But as Clara followed Lily toward the unknown, her grip on the child's small hand only strengthened. Whatever hardships lay ahead, she had just been given her first reason to stay. The days rolled into one another, marked by the lonely sound of the wind sweeping through the canyon and the distant call of coyotes at night. Clara had learned quickly that life on the frontier demanded not only strength, but a will that would not bend. Each morning, she rose before the sun. The air was sharp, biting against her cheeks as she stepped out of the cabin with a pail in hand. The earth smelled raw and wild, a mix of dust, pine, and far-off rain. It reminded her how far from Boston she truly was. Wyatt seldom spoke during those early hours. He worked with the quiet precision of a man who had done everything 1,000 times before. Fences were mended, stock watered, the corral swept clean. Clara, unused to the rhythm of ranch life, followed his lead, awkward at first, then with growing confidence. Her gloved hands blistered, but she never complained. Late one afternoon, as she gathered firewood near the creek, she heard a rustle behind her. Spinning quickly, she found herself staring at a painted pony, its reins trailing in the dust. A tall figure emerged from the line of cottonwoods, an Apache brave, his dark eyes fixed on her. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Wyatt appeared a moment later, rifle already leveled. His voice was calm but unyielding. Step back, Clara. Don't move. The Apache warrior raised an open hand, not in threat but in warning. He said something in his own tongue, words Clara couldn't understand but felt deep in her bones. The tension held for several long, breathless moments before the man turned and vanished into the trees, as silent as he had come. Wyatt lowered his rifle but didn't relax. "They're watching," he muttered. "Always watching." That night, Clara lay awake listening to the wind scrape against the windows. She wondered if the man had meant her harm, or if he was merely a shadow of something greater, something Wyatt refused to speak about. Out here, danger didn't always come with a shout. Sometimes it came with a whisper and disappeared before dawn. The morning sun broke through a haze of thin clouds, turning the prairie gold. Clara stood by the cabin window, watching Wyatt saddle his horse. His movements were efficient, almost mechanical, the motions of a man long accustomed to riding out into uncertainty. "Where are you going?" she asked, stepping onto the porch. "North pasture. Some of the cattle drifted during the night." He adjusted the cinch without looking up. "Stay close to the cabin. And keep that door barred." Clara folded her arms. "You speak as though I'm a child." Wyatt finally met her gaze, his eyes hard, the color of flint. "You're not. But out here, even grown folk get killed if they're careless." He mounted up and rode off, a streak of dust trailing behind him. Clara stood watching until he was no more than a moving speck against the horizon. The morning passed slowly. She kept herself busy, washing clothes in the creek, sweeping the cabin, and kneading dough for bread. But her thoughts kept returning to the Apache brave who had appeared the day before. His eyes had not been cruel, they had been searching, as if weighing her soul. By afternoon, the air turned restless. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint smell of smoke. Clara stepped outside and shaded her eyes. Far off, to the west, a thin column of gray twisted into the sky. Before she could think what it meant, a rider approached at a gallop. It wasn't Wyatt. The man was older, his hat pulled low, a scar running down his cheek. He drew up sharply in front of the cabin, his horse lathered from the ride. "You Wyatt's wife?" he barked. Clara stiffened. "I am. Name's Jeb Hollis. There's trouble brewin', settlers say a band of Apaches crossed the river last night. You'd best stay locked in till your man gets back." "Have they harmed anyone?" "Not yet," Jeb said grimly. "But they will." He turned his horse. "Tell Wyatt I'll be watchin' the south trail." Then he was gone in a spray of dust. Clara's hands trembled as she barred the door. The hours crawled by. Dusk fell heavy and slow, painting the sky with bands of crimson and deep blue. Still Wyatt had not returned. When the first stars appeared, Clara lit a lantern and set it by the window, hoping its glow would guide him home. Outside, the coyotes howled, long, mournful cries that seemed too close. She gripped the rifle Wyatt had left by the door, her heart thudding in her chest. Then, far off, hooves pounded against the hard earth. But it wasn't Wyatt's steady gait. It was faster. Urgent. Clara braced herself, breath shallow, as the sound drew near. The rider burst out of the darkness like a bullet, his horse slick with sweat and foam. Clara raised the rifle, her hands trembling, but the man reined in hard before the porch. "Mrs. Wyatt?" he called hoarsely. "It's bad. Calder's hurt." The words hit her like a blow. "Where is he?" she demanded, rushing forward. 2 miles east, near Dry Creek. "Horse through him, or maybe he was shot. Couldn't tell in the dark. You'd best come quick." Clara didn't hesitate. She grabbed Wyatt's spare coat, slung the rifle over her shoulder, and climbed onto the man's horse before fear could stop her. The night wind bit her face as they rode, hooves pounding over the prairie. Dry Creek lay in a shallow gully, moonlight silvering the stones. They found Wyatt slumped against a fallen log, his face pale, his shirt dark with blood. Clara slid off the horse and ran to him. "Calder! Calder, can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered. "Clara, you shouldn't be here." "Save your breath," she said fiercely. "You're coming home." With the stranger's help, she got him into the saddle. Wyatt gritted his teeth, refusing to cry out, though every step of the horse jarred his wound. By the time they reached the cabin, sweat poured down his face, and Clara feared he'd lose consciousness. Inside, she cleared the table and laid him on it, tearing open his blood-soaked shirt. The wound was a deep graze across his ribs, not mortal, but bad enough to cripple him if it festered. "Hold still," she ordered, heating water and grabbing the whiskey bottle. He gave her a tight grin. "You know what you're doing?" "I know I'm not letting you die," she shot back, dousing the wound with liquor. He hissed in pain but didn't flinch. As she stitched him up with trembling fingers, Wyatt's gaze never left her face. "You're tougher than you look," he murmured. "Save your compliments for later," she said, tying off the last knot. "You'll live. But you're not moving off that bed for days." The stranger, who had silently watched the whole time, finally spoke. "I'll ride to town, send the doc your way." "Thank you," Clara said, meaning it. When he'd gone, the cabin was quiet except for the soft hiss of the lantern. Clara sat beside Wyatt, wiping his brow. He caught her hand. "You shouldn't have come after me," he whispered. "And you shouldn't get yourself shot," she replied, her voice shaking though she tried to keep it steady. His fingers tightened on hers, then went slack as sleep claimed him. Clara kept watch all night, the rifle across her lap and her heart pounding at every distant sound. Somewhere out on the prairie, danger still rode, and they both knew it. The first light of dawn spilled across the plains, pale and cold. Clara sat slumped in a chair, her eyes heavy but unyielding. Wyatt still slept, his breathing deep, and even now that the bleeding had stopped. She rose to stoke the fire just as the door creaked open. Her hand darted to the rifle, but it was only Doc Harlan, looking dusty and irritable from his long ride. "Where's my patient?" the old man grumbled. "On the bed," Clara said softly. "I stitched him up myself." Harlan arched a brow at her work, then gave a low whistle. "Not bad for someone who isn't a doctor. You keep this up, I'll be out of a job." Clara ignored the compliment, watching anxiously as the doctor cleaned and dressed the wound. "Will he be all right?" Ribs cracked, but the bullet just grazed him. "Painful as the devil, but he'll live. Keep him still. Feed him broth. No heroics." Wyatt woke briefly, his eyes half-lidded. "No heroics, huh?" he rasped. "That's asking a lot." "Then do it for her," Harlan said, jerking his chin toward Clara. When the doctor left, the cabin felt strangely quiet again. Clara busied herself boiling water and making a thin stew, though her hands shook every time she thought of the unknown man who'd brought her the news. Wyatt broke the silence. "You're worried," he murmured from the bed. "I'm thinking," Clara admitted. "Whoever shot you or scared your horse, they're still out there. Why would anyone want you dead?" "Plenty of folks have their reasons," Wyatt said dryly. "Land disputes, old grudges. Take your pick. That's not good enough." She turned to face him, her jaw set. "If someone's trying to kill you, I need to know why. I need to know who." He gave a faint smile. "You're not just passing through anymore, are you?" "No," she said firmly. "I'm not." For a long moment, they stared at each other, something unspoken hanging in the air. Then Wyatt's expression softened. "Clara," he said quietly, "you're braver than any man I've ever met." Her throat tightened, but she only said, "Get some rest. We're not safe yet." Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the faint smell of smoke from somewhere far off, or maybe not so far at all.